let's start with this one. It's for Sophie and Louise. How do you think Girls Inc. changed your personal presence in your regular school?
Ooh, that's such a good question. Can I take it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You both can.
So, yeah, both of us. I actually started out at, and no disrespect, but Benilde St. Margaret's, which is a Catholic private school right on Highway 100. And it was just not the school for me. I think there was a lot of, it wasn't very diverse to start off with. And I couldn't find my group there. I'd been in Catholic schools, mean girls are a thing, whatever. So I was like, I gotta go. I gotta get out. I need some diversity. And now I'm at a school called Robbinsdale Cooper High School. And that's in woo, right? And that's in Robbinsdale. And it's been amazing. 70% diversity, top 5 public school over even like Minneapolis schools. So that's incredible, and I love it there. But the question, how does Girls Inc. play in your life? So Girls Inc. is actually a 5-year STEM program. So we start in the summer going into 7th grade. No, after 7th grade, sorry. I know math. And so when I started, I was still at Benilde, and I had this very privileged mindset. I was surrounded by people who thought the same way, so it's just kind of what I was accustomed to growing up. It's just privileged mindset, You got things handed to you, whatever. And I didn't like that, because that just wasn't me. And so going to Girls Inc. Eureka, which is based in Midtown, YWCA, right in Minneapolis, it's a diverse place, obviously. It's a city, and I had met people with different walks of life that I had never known, and I was like, whoa. I need this reality. I need this. I need this breath of fresh air, because I don't want to live under a rock. And that was the reality. I was living under a rock, my existence, and I didn't like that. And so growing up and seeing these girls, I was like, hey, these are actually really cool people, And everyone has a story. No matter if it looks like they do or don't, they have a story. And that was one of the main things I learned. And Girls Inc. really did help me realize that, and also push me to want that diversity more. So, yeah.
I would say it's kind of the opposite for me. So I go to a predominantly white school known as Blake, and it's definitely a time. I live in North Minneapolis, and my family is from Senegal. So yeah, so going magnifique. So going from a predominantly black neighborhood, black environment, to a all-white school, it feels like it's just very difficult in terms of formulating your identity, because it seems like you have two sides that you're choosing from constantly. And so going to Girls Inc. truly helped me sort of find that middle ground, because it felt like I had, like, one of my best friends is Somali, and she goes to Cristo Rey, which is also a private school, but is predominantly Mexican and Latina. And so she's also struggling between, like, which identity do I present at school, which do I keep for myself at home? And so, yeah, just back to the question, I would say that I feel the most in control of myself, in control of my identity when I'm at Girls Inc., just because I'm surrounded by people who are going through similar experiences as I am, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm back here. Hi. So this is kind of related to that last question. How do young women get involved with Girls Inc.? I know, Sophie, you mentioned that you started in, I think, 7th grade. But how do you find it? And this is a question that I had too. How did it find you, or how did you find it?
Do you want to take, you guys want to take that?
My mother. Yeah. Sitting right there. That's my mother.
Yeah, my mom hooked me up with Girls Inc.
Moms are great, and so
Thank
are
you,
dads.
Yep. We were just driving back home from the masjid, and one of my friends was involved in Girls Inc. back when it used to be at North Commons. And they're like, oh, did you hear about this club? It's like all girls. It's crazy. Like, oh my gosh. So I was like, okay, I'll just go. And then like 5 or however many years later, I'm still doing it, so.
Heck yeah. No, but, yeah, it's Elena.
Oh, I was going to say our after-school programs are at over 15 schools across primarily Minneapolis. So we get to interact with girls at their school sites. Our Eureka program is actually, we're accepting applications right now. So if any of you all are working with 7th graders who you think would benefit from this program, who are interested in STEM, who need the benefit of a pro-girl space, applications are due March 13th. Yes, right? And they're available on our website. We can answer any questions afterwards too.
Excellent. This question, I believe, is for Janata. What's your zodiac sign, and what does that tell us about you?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm a Cancerian. Yeah, you Cancerian? Yeah. We out here. And I think it really, as a young person, I used to feel overwhelmed by the emotionality that I felt. Like I was very tender and vulnerable and sensitive, as my mom said, you're so sensitive. But like I was, and I think for me it felt, as a young person, like the feelings ravished me and exhausted me. But like at this point in my life, I feel really grounded in how my emotions help me pay attention and feel folks, as well as protect folks and protect myself with intuition. So I feel like it does speak to my being a very emo person as a Cancerian.
Excellent. This one is for Sophie, Louise, and Elena, I'm guessing, but I think Janata, maybe you can answer too. It's how can schools create pro-girl spaces? I know we had some tips up there, but elaborating on that, my thought is like, how did you come to your Bill of Rights, and how does one implement those steps at the end that you questioned us about?
Well, the Bill of Rights comes from Girls Inc. National and was created in part with young people across the U.S. and Canada in updating the Bill of Rights, I don't know, like 20 years ago, I think was when it was most recently updated. And so with young people identifying what they wanted and what they really needed. I know a similar process was done by the UN in creating the Global Girls Bill of Rights, which was released this past fall. And so that's another great example that you can bring into your classrooms as well. I'll want to add into what you want to see.
And I think a main point of it is, as an educator, as a teacher, you have the power of a classroom. And that's really important. You know, you have students that are not forced to be there, but you know, you have the opportunity to have a room full of young kids. And I think it's not so much like, no guys, like, no, you know, no, that's not what we're saying. It's really about creating an environment where girls have equal opportunity as guys. And that's a big part of it. And, you know, don't overlook them when hands are raised, you know, in any situation. Just make things equalized. And I think that's the main message that we're trying to go for, you know? So just look out for those opportunities where you have the power as an educator to be like, I see some inequality here. Let's talk about that. Mm-hmm. You know, let's educate our young men and young women, their rights and what they're capable of in the future and now.
And another thing that I would stress would be, it's not just about equal sharing time, but it's about the equal sharing of experiences. Yeah. And so I think there was a statistic where it's like women, if there's like a woman talking for like 70% of the time or something, 30% of the time, men feel like they're dominating the conversation. And so just ensuring that, first of all, that doesn't happen, and also, that women are feeling safe enough to share their experiences, especially those who've been marginalized, because I think that we would all benefit from greater perspectives.
Yeah, I think another important statistic that will make your eyes kind of open is when women versus men apply for a job. This one is, women will not apply for a job unless they've met well near 100% of the qualifications, whereas men will apply for the job if they've met, I think, 60% of the requirements. And that's kind of shocking. So that confidence that like, oh, I can do it, you know, I'm 60% there, you know, let's go for it, you know? Like, let's take that risk. Whereas women are like, ooh, I'm not that, and I'm not that, and I'm not that. I can probably better qualify somewhere else, or I don't want to do it and be like shut down or rejected for that. I'm going to make sure that I got all these check marks. No, that's a powerful statistic, I think, to look at too.
And this is related to something Sophie said, this next question. Do you recommend in a classroom setting that teachers call out sexism as students express sexism, or do you pull kids aside later? Which one is a better teaching tool?
Yeah.
So I didn't mention this, but I used to work for Girls Inc. back in the day.
Yeah.
So I got Girls Inc. When I first moved back from New York. But one thing is also setting the tone of your classroom, I think, too. Like, I think young people deserve to know that walking into any space there's an intention around how their vulnerability will be protected, especially I think in a society and in communities where I know for me as a young person, I felt so vulnerable and, you know, and I think like the older and the more that I've gotten politicized, I really understand and have created space for young people myself is that it shouldn't be a thing where something should happen and then it's like, oh, okay, well, this is how we feel. But like the first day of school, it's like the curriculum, everything should be, you know, I think very feminist and inclusive and radical and also revolutionary to what our comfort levels are as educators.
I think some of it depends on the age of the students you're working with, but I always talk about how we know that even in gender-specific spaces, girls are going to be bringing up gender stereotypes because they hear them in the world around them, right? Like none of us are immune from being affected by those. So when young people bring up gender stereotypes or bring up examples of sexism, how do we respond to that in a way that doesn't shame them but like redirects that? So we talk about like if a young girl says, oh, I don't want to play in the mud because it's yucky. It's like, well, yucky can be fun. Yucky's not for everybody, but I'm going to disassociate that term from negative connotations and from gender stereotypes, and trying to embed those skills like really early and often to help prevent then situations where maybe you have blatant sexism and that's a very different level of how you call it out. Like it's a lot about that prevention and setting those norms and that common conversation about calling out stereotypes and naming them as such in a non-shaming way.
Yeah.
No, you guys got it.
Yeah.
Excellent. I think this one is for Janata. Maybe everybody can answer, though. How can we be active in a movement towards changing sex education in schools and emphasize the importance of gender fluidity exploration and make teaching consent mandatory?
I wish I knew, shoot. I think like part of it is, I don't know, I use this example often about like when I was coming of age and so much of the emphasis was like teen pregnancy, oh my God, you know, you better just be abstinent because if anything, like there just was no context of sex beyond fear, beyond stigma, beyond really shaming young people for having bodies that are changing and transforming and have the capacity to do these things. And how do you lean into the ways that, you know when you get grown and you out here doing your nasty stuff, you're like, oh, this is great. This isn't that bad. And, you know, if you get the right precautions, you could, you know? So I think like making it a lot more natural and magical and also giving young people empowerment and agency around their bodies. And a thing I think about often, and I think I was talking about it even today, was that like I'm a child of the 90s/80s, and I remember the Attorney General the Surgeon General was Dr. Jocelyn Elders. When I was, y'all remember Dr. Jocelyn Elders? And who got fired by one raggedy Bill Clinton because she was trying to have masturbation included within the curriculum of sex ed, you know, because young people should get to know their bodies and before they're getting involved with other people, like they should have a sense of what their body likes and whatnot, and was fired by the Bill Clinton of all frickin' people, right? So I just think like, you know, that there's so many, you know, like y'all were speaking to earlier, there's so many messages that we get in society that tells young people to, repress that part of themselves so that when it comes out sideways, it comes out in ways that are playing out the dysfunction of sexuality that a lot of us have, that doesn't think about consent, that doesn't think about fluidity and the ways that bodies can be worshipped, in the ways that you can experience sexuality regardless of what your body's able to do, that there's multiple ways to be an embodied person, even if you're an asexual person. So I think, in a lot of ways, when it comes to change, we all know with these school systems, there's such a status quo and a kind of standardization of how things should be, which are with the current power structures. So I do think as educators, a lot of it is, how are you subversively acknowledging things and including it within the conversations in ways that obviously, we're grown and we know what's appropriate, but also directing young people to resources that affirm them in their bodies. Because, it's so wild when I think about being y'all age. There's so much I forget about what my body was excited about and experiencing for the first time, because I felt so I felt like I had to shut that down because of how I thought my parents, this is my child, would, react or what have you. I think this is part of my activism work within this book is all right, how do I give young people an opportunity to know that it's okay to feel a lot of feelings? And actually that is what's gonna guide you to know what you want in life. And that's, should be affirmed.
I think one thing I can add, being a high school senior, is that the language around those conversations is so critical, because I can tell you how triggered I get when guys say that's so gay. No, actually, if you're gonna explore something, do it. That's not gay. That doesn't make you any less of a person to explore things and talk about those things. If you have a question, ask it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just baffles my mind.
They say it's so gay in reference to what kinds of things?
In
anything.
in boys who are looked at as that toxic masculinity, you shouldn't
Boys
be
who
doing
hug
that.
each
You shouldn't
other,
be vulnerable. You shouldn't try
all
new
that.
things. If
Yeah.
you want to explore that, that's something that's looked down upon. No. I think the language around those conversations really should be analyzed, and the connotation, that negative connotation, we can cut
I agree
that.
with that. Yep.
Did you want to add something, Louise?
Two just really quick advocacy notes. Did you have something to add too, Louise?
No, I was
just Minneapolis Public Schools right now is relooking at their high school healthy sexuality curricula. So there's opportunities this spring to be advocates for making sure that curricula and or adjustments to the standards that are happening in our district are more inclusive and are more meet the needs of what young people need.
And radical.
Yeah, and radical, really. Yeah, we need people to push on that, so watch for opportunities with the school board to share your opinion on that and help push them on that. And there also has been a bill that has gone to the Minnesota State House to try to make affirmative consent mandatory in Minnesota. It did not get anywhere the last session, but watch for opportunities to also have your voice heard around that.
Excellent. Question for, there's that pen again. Question for, maybe Elena. How is Girls Inc. funded / financed, and does it cost anything for girls? Also, what are barriers to girls participating? Financial, transportation, none at all?
Girls Inc. is offered completely free of charge for girls in our community. We're funded through a combination of grants, private funders, being a part of the larger YWCA, and the great programs that they provide in the community. We're able to offer all Girls Inc. programming free of charge. Transportation can be a barrier, especially for Eureka. For our after-school programs, we're at the school sites, but we know if the school sites don't have great transportation that gets young people home, they're not necessarily able to stay. For Eureka, they have to make it to and from YWCA Midtown. But otherwise, free of charge. Let me know afterwards if you have questions about what schools we're at. Anything that I should add, Lee? We offer bus tokens. We try to counter transportation. That's the place where if I had a magical wand for lots more money, transportation would be one of the places I put it into. Yeah.
Excellent. This question it doesn't say who it's to, so everybody can answer. Do you travel to agencies to speak on the work / projects you do?
I mean, I don't travel agencies.
Well,
You're like, I will.
Yeah, if you want me.
as I think I mentioned in my talk, I was a part of a group called Girls Action Network, which is where I got to pick piece of legislature to study and then to make adjustments. And mine happened to be something towards, I think it was Title IX. It was like, yeah. And like, we got to review that and add some changes and then actually bring it to people in Congress. So that was pretty exciting in a way that I could express one of my social advocacy, social justice outlets. I loved doing that, and it was super fun. And I got to go to DC to do that. So there was that, and then.
Would you go and tap the places around here?
Oh yeah,
Sorry.
I was just gonna say I
that
did.
was the way I got to.
Yeah, I would say I do a lot of things within my school. So speaking at school, speaking at leadership fairs, things like that. Through Girls Inc., there's this club called the Girls Inc. Council for Advocacy and Change, which I'm the president of. And so we do a lot of like work there, community service work, speaking work, things like that. But yeah, I would say mainly through leadership, through school, and community service, if that counts as an agency. Yeah? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I do all kinds of speaking engagements and consulting work.
Excellent.
And also, Girls Inc. will occasionally come out and facilitate either talks for staff or workshops as well. So.
Last question, well, second to last question. What is your piece of advice for young women trying to find themselves and their passions?
I would say I think a lot of the things that I'm doing now that brings me joy, I was doing when I was young. And I spent a lot of time convincing myself of things that I thought I should be doing or that would be more doable or, you know what I mean? And I think whatever purely brings you joy and makes you feel like the sweetest, most yummiest, I think that should be a thing that young people are taught should be prioritized rather than, well, will it make you money? Even the things you think will make you money, lawyers ain't even making money right now. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you know, I think not having young people think about they won't survive unless they do one specific thing, because at the end of the day, sometimes if you repress and push that down, you will forget what brings you joy. And you will do a whole bunch of other things. Like the more you repress the sense of what makes you happy and what fills you up, something gets lost in life. And I think with young people, it's always reminding them like, yeah, like go for the risk of your dreams rather than the safety of what other people's fears will tell you to do.
I think I agree.
Me too.
I want, maybe the person who asked this question wants some like social advocacy, but I'm going to talk about fishing and hunting. Because I, as a kid, loved fishing and hunting. It's one of my like greatest passions. When I was younger, I would like pick out the worms and like name them. And like, that one's Sally. Okay, but like in school, a lot of the times, like people are like, well, that's not for girls. You play in the mud, kind of like what Elena was talking about. And so I kind of like would never talk about it. But as I got to high school, I was like, you know what? Screw it. Let's do it. I'm a hunter. I fish. Like, those are my favorite passions. And I think some advice is just to go for it. Like, why not? There's this sign that I always used to see in elementary school. It's like, in 20 years, people will never remember what you wore or how you dressed or what shoes you had. And I was like, that's true. Like, I look at any adult and I'm like, no one cared. Like, whatever, you're grown, you know? So I like look at that and I looked at that philosophy a little bit like longer and I was like, I'm gonna take that. And so I just went for it. So I think that's the best thing you can do, is that although as corny as that is, it's true. Like, I think you guys can all attest to that. Like, no one remembers what they wore in elementary school, like the shoes or what you thought would make you cool.
I would say just go out of your comfort zone more and just choose something that like you normally wouldn't do. For me, that was Conservation Corps, which really grounded in me the important values of nature and spirituality and meditation and all of that good stuff. And so, yeah, I would just say go out of your comfort zone, do something that you normally wouldn't do, because if you just go out your comfort zone, you're probably gonna find something you like and stick with it, like me.
I think on kind of similar lines, I really wish I knew in high school that it was okay to fail, like, because I think I did have confidence from my family and from some key mentors to be able to go out and take some risks, but there were still risks where like my failure wouldn't have impacted anybody else, right? And so I think it took me a long time to be comfortable with the Bill of Rights that we have, right? Of like being okay with taking risks and taking pride in that and like celebrating those opportunities and successes. And that was something that I wish I had had at a younger age.
Excellent. Well, our last question isn't so much a question as like a private note for Janata. It says, I love you for. I think, yeah, that's really sweet. So I thought that was a good note to end on. I love you. So I wanted to take a few minutes at last to, again, encourage you to fill out that survey.